Yeah, my name is Phil Royer, and I'm going to be talking now about top turning and also about texturing the tops using the Sorby spiraling and texturing tools, some Ron Brown tools, and some ones that come as they came from the factory and some that I've modified. I've turned quite a few tops in the past couple of years. The Kansas City Woodturners Club turns these tops and donates them to the Ronald McDonald House. And I've, since the quarantine, I've probably turned 300 or 400 tops. And before that, I turned, 500 or 600 tops. And one of the advantages to top turning is if you turn, several hundred tops, your next lathe project, when you're trying to do finials or whatever, the techniques that you use in turning the tops works well on the other lathe project also. I'll start off with my tools here. What I use to hold the top blank is a 3/8 inch dowel chuck that I bought from Craft Supplies. It's been machined such that the jaws have a 3/8 inch diameter that fits the 3/8 inch dowel on the top blank, and it doesn't leave dents or cause it to go off center. And I found this to be real handy and real useful for me, and they work real well. They're a little bit pricey. You could use a standard 3/8 half inch 3-jaw chuck, but it does tend to leave some little dents in it and maybe throw it off center a little bit. I personally also have used a collet chuck, and that seems to work real well, although I find this works the best. To go into the tailstock, I use a mandrel saver that's normally used for turning pins, and I turn the dowel on the blank to a pointed end when we start out, and it goes in there and sort of self-centers. And by having it held in the dowel chuck on the one end and centered on this end, I get a smooth and true running top, and it works real well for me. Other people use a cone chuck or a cone center, or if you have the robust or the one-way live center, it's got an opening for 3/8 inch, and people use those. But I find this works real well for me, and I had it, and they're pretty inexpensive. Jeff has them out front for less than $20. And if you happen to turn pins, it would be helpful for that. I think Bill last week talked about this was one of the options he used for turning pins, but for turning pins he'd moved on to something else. Okay, any lathe tools will work. I use primarily spindle gouges and skews. The other thing I use is a special class of spindle gouge called a detail gouge. And some people turn real fancy, pointy grinds on it, but I use, let's see up here, about a 45-degree bevel and a pretty blunt grind. And the main reason I use the detail gouge is because the flute is shallow and there's a lot of heft in here. So when I put it down on the tool rest, I can be fairly far over the tool rest and it's still pretty sturdy. Here's a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. It also works well, but the flute's a little deeper and the mass of the tool is not quite as much as it would be on the detail gouge. Then I've got a 3/8 inch or a half inch skew chisel here that I like real well, and turning the tops gives you a little bit of experience using the skew, which some people seem to have some issues with. I know that I do. And then this is a beading and parting tool that I made from a 1/4 inch square piece of high-speed steel I bought off of the internet. And you could use a Sorby one or a Henry Taylor, Crown, anybody, but I find that this is helpful in some of the cuts that I make with the tops. I use sandpaper. I just kind of grab what's at hand. I use 150, 220, whatever. I find that turning fairly fast and using sharp tools, I get a fairly smooth cut straight from the tools. That for the purpose of the tops probably would be okay. It's smooth enough that it would be fine. What I find with the sandpaper, that if I sand the surface that I'm going to texture, I get a little bit more even absorption of the markers that I use, and the color's a little better. Sometimes I forget to do that and it works okay. You can use a coarser sandpaper or 220. Occasionally, if I got a piece of 320, that's the first thing I reach for, I use it and it works. Okay, the texturing tools I use, here's the, let's see if I can get it up here. The first one is just the standard Sorby mini texturing tool. I pull the little rest that it comes with off, and I find that this works real well for general spiraling and texturing, but on the tops it doesn't work as well for me as the tools that I modified. This will work here. This is good. If you go to the Sorby website or see any YouTube videos about them demonstrating their tools, they always come at it from the end. They do it against end grain, and they come at it perpendicular to the surface, and you get all these nice snakeskin textures and spirals, and everything works real great. When you've got a top chucked up in the lathe, you can't get in there perpendicular to the surface to get the nice textures. If you come around on this other end, you can do a little bit better, but I like to turn the tops with this orientation so that the top is spinning free and I'm able to true up the point without it being supported. I know that Ron Brown turns a lot of tops or used to at the wood turning shows or woodworking shows when they had them, and he'd turn them in the opposite orientation, and this would free up this part of the top for him to apply his texture, and he'd get a good texture. But then when he had to go in later and just cut the top free and hope that the point that he got was true. And he's turned hundreds, thousands of tops and had good luck, but I just rather would turn it this way. And speaking of Ron Brown, I've purchased several of his texturing tools, and basically they appear to me to be metalworking knurling tools that they have adapted for the wood lathe, and I've had good luck with those and they work fine. This gives kind of this other one gives a little mill surface to the outer edge. Craft Supplies also sells these, and probably other people do also. This is a tool that I've made from the Sorby tool. It's the same cutter that's in the Sorby tool. I just have a different orientation of it, and this allows me to, when I've got the top chucked into the lathe, I can come in here and hit the surface of the top surface perpendicular, and get the nice sort of decorative spiral that I'm after. Okay, here's the Sorby cutter. Here's the screw that I go into. It's just any screw you get from Ace Hardware. And this is a flange bushing that I purchased off of eBay. It's an oil impregnated flange bushing. Fits the screw, and then the Sorby cutter goes on it. And I've had pretty good luck with those, and I've had several people go ahead and make some of their own. Here's another one. This is a real low-tech version. This is just the texturing tool that Sorby makes. And I found a nylon flange bushing that I got at West Lakes, and just a wood screw, and this has worked okay for me. So if you have the Sorby tools and want to kind of give this technique a try, you could do this fairly easily and fairly inexpensively. Another thing that would work, Henry Taylor makes a little tool, basically is a Dremel cutter that goes into a little ball bearing holder. It's called the ELF tool to do texturing. Ron Brown also sells a similar tool. There may be other people. And I don't have one here. I've got them at home. I've used them, but I seem to use these other tools on my tops quite a bit more. Well, I don't have a chatter tool here, but they do work. And it's just a real flexible piece of metal. It looks like a hacksaw blade, about that size, but I don't think that's what it is. And you just hold it up against the spinning surface, and it makes a horrible racket and a nice texture. I guess I don't like the noise it makes. Is one of the reasons I don't use it all that much, although it works well. And the other thing is it's not repeatable at all. To some degree, I can get the same textures using these tools on different tops, so they're going to vary a little bit. With me, on the chatter tool, every one is like a Forrest Gump, life's a box of chocolates, you don't know what you're going to get. When you use the chatter tool, they usually turn out nice, but you don't know what you're going to end up with. As far as the wood that I use to turn tops, it would be possible to take a 2x2 piece of maple by about 3.5, 4 inches long and turn a top from solid wood. And there's internet videos on doing that, and that works real well. There's a couple of issues with it. You're turning a lot of your expensive wood into shavings. It's wasteful. There's a lot of extra sawdust to clean up. And I just find that taking and making the blocks out of a 3/8 inch dowel and taking basically a 2x2 and cutting up sausage wise, drilling a hole and putting the dowel into the hole is the best way, most inexpensive, most efficient way to make the tops. And since we're doing hundreds of them, it helps to keep it a little cheaper, even though they do go for a good cause. The dowels that I use, Jeff sells out here. They're birch dowels. I looked just now, they were 49 cents. The maple dowels, I believe, are better, but they're also several times. If I didn't mislook at the price, they were $1.75 for one maple dowel. But regardless, they're much more expensive, and I think they are a little better, but I think that the birch dowels work just fine. I would say out of 100 tops I turn, I might break one birch dowel that I wouldn't have broke had the top been maple, but for the price difference, to me this works pretty well. And again, you can see here that this is just a sausage piece, if I can figure out which way to move to get under this camera, of maple, and I drill holes in it, and you can be as precise or as not precise as you want drilling the holes, as long as you leave enough on the outside to cut the diameter of top that you need. This is for this part of the top. I find that personally the maple works the best. I've used birch. It's usually not quite as readily available. You could use other woods. If you're going to do the texturing and coloring, it's best to stick with a wood that will show the texture and the color, which is a lighter wood. But if you have some kind of a large supply of 2x2s of some kind of exotic, funny, weird wood that is reasonably soft to turn, but it's light, and you've already got it, it would work for tops also. But again, for me, the maple works the best. Here and elsewhere you can buy the maple 2x2s, which I think usually are a little less than 2x2s. You can buy boards, and really if I'm going to make a bunch of blanks, I find that buying a rough 8/4 piece and kind of check it out and be sure I can get the square pieces cut into the right number of pieces out of the board that I'm buying. To me, that's probably the cheapest way to do it, and I just usually cut it up on on a bandsaw, and then use the bandsaw to slice it into pieces. You could use chop saws, table saws, hand saws, any way to get it cut into the right sizes. The one thing you have to be aware of is that some people see a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch by 2 by 2 piece of wood, and they think they can use a piece of flat stock, just cut it into 2-inch pieces, drill the hole, and make the tops out of it. The problem is when you're doing that, you're mixing the grain orientation. You need to think of the top blank in terms of, as I mentioned before, you could take a maple 2 by 2 and chuck it up and make your top, but all the grain is going to be running the same direction here. If you use a flat piece, then you got different grain. You got flat grain versus long grain. And I think that if I had some of those blanks made that way, about 1 out of every 3 I could get a top made. But I've had people tell me they can't turn tops, it always breaks. And on some of the cases I found out they were trying to make their blanks up that way. I cut the dowels about 3 inches long. I like to have them a little shorter than some of the other people that turn tops. It's just a little less expensive. You've also got less wood, the big heavy pieces sticking closer into the chuck. When I drill the piece of maple to put the dowel into, you've got to be kind of careful as to what size hole you drill. As good as the dowels are, they vary from dowel to dowel, and they might vary from one end to the other. So if you've got just a sort of a loose fit on one of them, by the time you get to the other end of that piece of dowel, they might be completely too loose. I like to have a good wood-to-wood, glue-to-glue surface when I turn them up. Some people have had luck, just being able to hand do it so that hand push them on, but again, you can't tell when you turn 100 of them how consistent that's going to be. I use tight bond glue. I've got a set of drill bits that I usually, when I'm turning these, I think I use a 23/64 bit, and then for the 3/8, I think the numbers are right, but a 64th under 3/8, and that usually gives me a pretty tight fit. I put glue on them and then take a hammer and drive them in. Some people chuck them up into the chuck and spin them on. Also, some people do CA glue. The problem I have with CA glue, I found that eventually it will let go, and sometimes it'll let go when there's a little bit of a shock. So if you get just a little bit of a catch, sometimes the CA glue will work. But again, if that's how you like to do things and you like CA glue, and I like CA glue, but for some other things, do whatever works. I'm not telling you the way to turn tops or make top blanks or do any of this. I'm just saying this is how I do it and this is what works for me. So if you've got some other way you like to do it and it works for you, if somebody else you know is turning tops or doing textures and that works for them and you want to try that way, I've got no problem with that. But what I do here works for me. Like this, I think I'm probably the only person I know that uses this mandrel saver, but I had it and it works good for me. So after I've made the blanks, turned the tops, use the texturing tools, and then I mark on them as the lathe is turning using markers. These are called Tombow dual brush markers. They're available at Michael's and other art supply stores. I believe at Craft Supplies, Ron Brown, and some of the lathe supply people also sell these. They've got a big brush on one end, and they've got a tiny marker on the other. And there we go. I don't think I had the brush under them. There we go. The brush is the main thing I've used. Any markers you've got, you can try. I also use Sharpies. My wife does scrapbooking and has expensive markers that she buys and don't work out for her, so I end up and am able to use them on my tops. She's got some Copic markers, which I think cost about $89 a marker, and I haven't got to use those. And you know, I'd say something to her about using them, but she usually doesn't say anything when I buy a new wood turning tool. So whatever she wants to spend is okay with me, as long as, you know, we can eat. The other thing, the Tombow markers are a water base, which is good if kids are going to be handling them. They're child safe. I also think the Sharpies, the other ones that are not water based, you put such a thin coat on them that they're going to be safe also. You know, everybody's got their own opinion on that. If you don't feel comfortable putting Sharpie on something that a child is going to use, then don't do it. One thing I like about using the different markers, and I use them on the same top, is if you use two of the water-based markers and you move them up against each other, they dissolve each other and blend. Whereas if you use a Sharpie that's not water-based, you can bring the Tombow, which is water-based, right over it, and you'll get an optical blending, but it won't actually mix the ink and turn black like it can. And that's a lot of this is just experimenting, and you turn as, you know, a lot of tops, and you get some stuff that works and some that don't. Donating them to the kids, I toss them, you know, if I have one that isn't the greatest thing ever, I figure, well, there's some kid that's going to like this. And also, we've talked about it, the people that turn them for the Ronald McDonald House. Sometimes the kids like the ones that don't turn as well, they're a little wobbly. And then also people are concerned about whether I don't have a place to spin it, you can take your top to and spin it upside down. My tops, I guarantee that they won't spin upside down. And if you can make them spin upside down, then I'll give you your money back. I think they do, but they're not designed to do that, and that's not something I worry about. Talking about safety, I don't know exactly what this thing is called. If I can, it says safety first. It's a child safety tester, and the way it's set up, if you can, anything that you put in it, if it fits all the way in, then it's not safe. So this top here won't fit in, so it's safe. I turned this one earlier, and I was thinking, well, maybe it's too small, but it won't go in. It's about a quarter of an inch larger than would fit down inside there. But if you've got something where the diameter fits down inside there and the whole thing fits in without anything sticking out, then it's not safe. I got this on the internet somewhere. But basically, if it's 1.25 inches in diameter, you're safe. You don't need to buy one of these. The other issue too is if you've got one on the floor and step on it, then it's going to make some pieces that won't be safe for children. So that's something to be concerned with. But I'm always assuming there has to be some kind of supervision with the kids. You can't do it, everything completely safe. Other people say, well, I'm turning these tops for adults. It doesn't have to be large enough so that a kid couldn't swallow it. Yeah, you never know where the top's going to go. So I try not to make one that wouldn't be safe for a child. As far as the color categories, one of the people in the Kansas City Club he finds colors of the NFL teams. He feels that they've got color consultants, that they paid lots and lots of money to come up with colors, and they're good, and that's right. If you do yellow and green or red and orange or whatever, the colors are going to look good. One of the things I also do is, as I'm turning the top, if I'm not sure about the color, I'll, as it's in here, I'll put the color up on the stem that I'm going to later turn away, and then maybe get the other color and see how well they go together.